Billionaire gets a call from hospital. Sir, your number is saved on a waitress's phone as Dad. What if one phone call could change everything you thought you knew about your life? The rain hit against the huge windows on the 42nd floor as Jonathan Reed signed another contract worth millions of dollars. At 43, he'd built a huge business from nothing. But tonight felt different. His phone buzzed. An unknown number from St. Mary's Hospital. Mr. Reed, this is unusual, but we found your phone number saved as Dad on a young woman's phone. She's been in an accident. Jonathan's pen stopped in the middle of his signature. He didn't have children, never married. The hospital workers explained that 28-year-old Lily Chen had been hit by a car while walking home from her night shift at Murphy's Diner. Sir, she's asking for you, the nurse whispered. She keeps saying she needs to tell her dad something important. Jonathan stared at his reflection in the dark window, his heart racing with questions he couldn't answer. Where are you watching from tonight? 20 minutes later, Jonathan's driver pulled up to St. Mary's Hospital. He'd never been inside Murphy's Diner, though he drove past it every morning on his way to the office. It was one of those small, family-owned places with checkered tablecloths and handwritten daily specials, taped to the window, the kind of place his mother used to take him before she passed when he was 12. The hospital smelled of cleaning chemicals and fresh coffee. Jonathan walked up to the information desk, his expensive suit feeling out of place among the worried families in the waiting room. I'm here about Lily Chen, he told the receptionist, his voice unusually quiet. I received a call. Nurse Patricia Williams, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, led him down the hallway. She's stable now, Mr. Reed. Broken ribs, concussion, but she'll recover. The strange thing is she's been talking about you for months. Always mentioned her dad would visit soon. Jonathan's stomach tightened. I think there's been a mistake. I don't know this young woman. Outside room 314, Patricia paused. Mr. Reed, sometimes people create family in ways we don't expect. Lily's been working double shifts to pay for her grandmother's medication. She never mentions any other family. Through the small window, Jonathan saw a small woman with dark hair lying still, her face peaceful despite the bandages. She started working at Murphy's 6 months ago, Patricia continued. Always cheerful, even when customers were difficult. The other nurses know her. She brings us leftover pie sometimes. Jonathan remembered driving past the diner, always too busy to stop, always rushing to the next meeting. Patricia handed him a small notebook. The doctor found this in her apron pocket. It's full of things she wanted to tell someone called Dad. Jonathan opened it carefully. The first page read, Dad, I saw you drive by again today. I hope someday you'll stop in. I make the coffee extra strong, just how I think you'd like it. His hands shook as he read entry after entry, each one describing moments he'd never shared with anyone. How did this stranger know he liked black coffee? That he always loosened his tie when he was thinking? That he touched the small scar on his left hand when he was nervous? The same gesture he was making right now. Jonathan stepped quietly into Lily's room, unsure of what to say or do. Her grandmother, Mrs. Chen, sat in the corner chair, her old hands clasped in prayer. She looked up as he entered, studying his face with the wisdom of someone who'd lived through 8 decades. You must be Jonathan, she said softly, rising to her feet. Lily talks about you every day. She says you have sad eyes, like someone who's forgotten how to smile. Jonathan felt exposed, as if this elderly woman could see straight through his carefully built walls. Mrs. Chen, I think there's been some confusion. I don't know your granddaughter. But even as he spoke, something tugged at his memory. Those words in the notebook, they felt familiar, like conversations he'd had with himself during long, lonely nights. Mrs. Chen smiled gently. Lily has a gift for seeing people's hearts. Months ago, she started working the morning shift, just so she could wave at you through the diner window. She said you looked like you needed a daughter's love. The old woman's eyes sparkled with tears that hadn't fallen yet. She lost her parents when she was 10. I raised her, but I know she's always wondered what it would be like to have a father. Jonathan sat down heavily in the chair beside Lily's bed. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. On the nightstand sat a small framed photo of Mrs. Chen and Lily at what looked like a graduation ceremony. Lily wore a simple blue dress and the brightest smile he'd ever seen. She graduated from nursing school last month. Mrs. Chen continued. Top of her class, but she keeps working at the diner to help pay for my heart medication. Every morning she looks out that window, hoping you'll come in. She practices what she'd say to you. Mrs. Chen reached into her purse and pulled out a worn piece of paper. She wrote the speech for Father's Day. Dear Dad, I know we're strangers, but I believe in families that choose each other. Jonathan felt something crack inside his chest. A wall he'd built 20 years ago when his own father walked out. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Mrs. Chen, he whispered. Tell me about her. Tell me about Lily. As the old woman began sharing stories of her granddaughter's kindness, Jonathan found himself leaning forward, hungry for details about this young woman who'd somehow seen past his expensive suits to the lonely man underneath. 2 hours passed as Mrs. Chen painted a picture of Lily's life. She'd been raising money for the children's ward at this very hospital, organizing bake sales and community dinners despite working 60-hour weeks. She volunteered at the local literacy center on Sundays, teaching elderly immigrants to read English. She has your stubbornness, Mrs. Chen said with a knowing smile, always putting others first even when she shouldn't. Jonathan's throat tightened. He thought of his own childhood, how he'd promised himself he'd never be the kind of man who abandoned people who needed him. Yet, here he was, 43 years old, with more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes, and he'd never even noticed the young woman who'd been trying to connect with him. She knows about your mother, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Lily researched you online after she decided you were family. She read about how you lost your mother young, how you built your company from nothing. She says you two are alike, both trying to take care of the world because no one took care of you. The words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. How could a stranger understand him so completely when he barely understood himself? He looked at Lily's sleeping face, really looked, and saw something he'd missed before. She had the same determined chin his mother had possessed, the same gentle strength in her features, even while unconscious. Mr. Reed, Mrs. Chen continued, Lily's been saving money for something special. She wanted to surprise you. The elderly woman pulled out a small wrapped box from her bag. She bought this last week, said, every father deserves a gift from his daughter. Jonathan's hands shook as he unwrapped the simple paper. Inside was a silver keychain with an engraved message. To Dad, thank you for showing me what strength looks like. Love, Lily. Below, it was the date of the first morning she'd seen him drive past the diner. A sob escaped his throat before he could stop it. In all his years of business deals and board meetings, no one had ever given him something so purely heartfelt. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Mrs. Chen, what if I'm not the father she thinks I am? What if I disappoint her? The old woman reached over and patted his hand. Jonathan, real fathers aren't born. They're made by love and choice. Lily chose you 6 months ago. Now you get to choose her back. At dawn, Lily's eyes fluttered open. The first thing she saw was Jonathan sitting beside her bed, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled suit, his usually perfect hair messed up from running his hands through it all night. For a moment confusion crossed her face, then recognition, then something that looked like pure joy. Dad, she whispered, her voice hoarse but warm. You came. Jonathan leaned forward, his heart hammering. Lily, I got your notebook. I read what you wrote. He held up the small journal, its pages now familiar to him. I don't understand how you knew, but everything you wrote about me. It's true. Lily smiled weakly. I used to sit by the window during morning rush hour watching people. Most folks looked angry or stressed, but you looked lost, like you were driving somewhere, but didn't know where you belonged. She tried to sit up, wincing slightly. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 10. Grandma Chen raised me, but I always wondered what it would feel like to have a dad who worried about me. Lily, Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion. I've spent 20 years building a business empire, but I've never built a family. I've never let anyone close enough to matter. He picked up the keychain she'd bought him. This means more to me than any contract I've ever signed. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, casting warm light across the room. Mrs. Chen had gone home to rest, leaving them alone for the first time. I want to tell you something, Jonathan continued. My mother died when I was 12. My father left right after. I promised myself I'd never abandon anyone who needed me, but somehow I abandoned myself instead. Lily reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were small and warm, rough from years of hard work. Dad, family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. You showed up. She squeezed his hand gently. I've been saving money to buy you dinner at the diner, to officially ask if you'd let me be your daughter. Jonathan felt tears he'd held back for 30 years finally break free. Lily, I'd be honored to be your father. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. He stood up and kissed her forehead gently. But first, you need to get better. Then I want to hear all about this speech you wrote for Father's Day. 3 weeks later, Jonathan sat in his usual booth at Murphy's Diner, though he supposed it wasn't really his usual booth since this was only his 4th visit. But Lily had declared it his spot, and the other staff had started bringing him black coffee without being asked. The morning sun painted everything golden, and for the first time in years, Jonathan wasn't thinking about stock reports or quarterly projections. Lily emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 plates of homemade apple pie, moving carefully but steadily. Her ribs were still healing, but she'd insisted on returning to work part-time. "Doctor's orders say I can't lift heavy trays yet," she said, sliding into the booth across from him, "but I can definitely handle pie duty." "You know you don't have to work here anymore," Jonathan said, watching her face light up as she tasted her grandmother's recipe. "I meant what I said about paying for nursing school. Full tuition, no strings attached." Lily shook her head, smiling. "Dad, this place is part of who I am. Besides, Mrs. Patterson at table 6 specifically requests my coffee, and I'm not about to abandon her." She reached across the table and straightened his tie, a gesture so naturally fatherly that it made Jonathan's chest tighten with happiness. "But I did accept your offer about Grandma Chen's medication." She cried for an hour when the pharmacy said her prescription was completely covered. Jonathan pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. "Speaking of your grandmother, look what came in yesterday." On the screen was a picture of a small, beautifully landscaped garden with a bench in the center. It's the new memorial garden at the Children's Hospital. The plaque says, "The Lily Chen Garden for Healing. Every child who stays there will have a peaceful place to recover." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Jonathan interrupted gently. "Every father wants to make his daughter's dreams come true. You wanted to help sick children feel better. Now you will for years to come." As they sat together sharing pie and watching the morning commuters rush past the window, Jonathan realized he'd finally found what he'd been driving toward all these years. It wasn't another business deal or bigger office. It was this: a daughter who chose to love him, a purpose that mattered beyond profit margins, and the simple joy of being needed by someone whose heart was bigger than her own circumstances. "Lily," he said, pulling the keychain from his pocket, "I carry this everywhere now, but I want you to know you don't need to thank me for showing you strength. You showed me what love looks like." Outside, the city moved at its usual fast pace. But inside Murphy's diner, a billionaire and a waitress sat together like they'd been family all their lives. Because in all the ways that mattered, they always had been. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining Jonathan and Lily's journey. May you find the family your heart has been searching for.